Into the Void is a feature film for Series 2 of Final Girl where you'll be fighting against the Evomorph on the USS Konrad. In this scenario, the Evomorph starts as a hatchling with low movement and health but very high attack. After its first kill, it will vanish from the ship and evolve into a Youngling. While it has vanished, it will skip its killer action and Terra card and instead draw an ambush card, which could result in it evolving into an adult and ambushing you. But don't worry, the USS Konrad has plenty of ways to evade and kill the Evomorph, including maintenance shafts that are off limits to the killer, crushing it in the trash compactor, opening the airlock, and activating the self-destruct sequence for the ship. In this video, I'll go over the special rules for Evomorph in the USS Konrad and clarify some commonly misplayed rules and cards. Note that I'll be using minis to better represent the killer in this video, and the minis are sold separately from the feature film. If you want a general overview of how to play Final Girl, then check out my rules video before you watch this one. Set up the killer board as normal and add the evolution card next to the board with the green marker on the top hatchling space. The Evomorph board shows a starting health of 4/10. Both the hatchling and youngling have a health of 4, so place 1 final health token plus 3 hearts on the killer board. Later in the game, when it evolves into an adult, it will have 10 health. Shuffle the killer and location's terror cards together and deal out 8 instead of 10 for the terror deck. Then shuffle the ambush cards together and place them face down next to the terror deck with the youngling side at the top like this. Finally, add the 3 scan cards to the action tableau. To set up the item decks for the USS Konrad, first set the Super Loader card next to the play area and the Super Loader token in the hanger here. Put 1 keycard in your backpack with a keycard token on it and 2 other keycards next to the board. The token locations for these 2 keycards will be shown on the setup card like this, so put 1 keycard token in each of those spaces. The rest of the keycards get shuffled with the other item cards to create 3 item decks with 4 cards each like normal. Finally, place the 3 maintenance cards next to your player board face up for reference later. The Evomorph is a killer who evolves throughout the game. It starts off as a hatchling and later evolves into a youngling and finally an adult when you reach the evolve spaces on the Bloodlust track. The hatchling and youngling both have 4 health and the adult has 10 health. The hatchling starts with an attack of 10, which is huge, and a movement of 1. The default killer action is to target the closest victim, move towards them, and attack. Notice that the target is victims only. If there are no victims on the board, then the Evomorph won't move. But a killer will never waste an attack, so if it ends its movement in a space with only the final girl, the killer will still attack her. The hatchling has a special rule where bloodlust can only increase if it kills a victim. Any other bloodlust increases from terror cards, events, or victims dying in other ways are ignored, and you lose 1 time for each bloodlust increase instead. This is because as soon as the hatchling kills a victim and bloodlust increases, it triggers an evolve as shown here. To evolve the Evomorph, move the marker on the evolution card down to the next stage and follow all the instructions listed. The hatchling evolves into a youngling after its first kill, and the youngling immediately vanishes as shown here on the evolution card. Bloodlust also increases normally now for the youngling and later for the adult. Vanishing is represented by this symbol on the evolution card and other terror cards. When the Evomorph vanishes, remove it from the board, place it on top of the terror deck, and immediately end the killer phase. Do not draw a terror card or ambush card, skip right to the panic phase, which won't happen either because the killer isn't on the board anymore. On future turns, if the Evomorph is vanished, then instead of doing the killer action and drawing a terror card, you will draw an ambush card instead. I'll repeat that again. If the Evomorph is vanished, then during the killer phase, you only draw an ambush card, nothing else. We place the killer on top of the terror deck to remind us. The ambush cards have 2 orientations, one for the youngling and one for the adult. When you start the game, make sure the youngling side is at the top. During the killer phase, you'll draw an ambush card when the youngling is vanished and do any effects showing at the top. Ignore the effects that are upside down on the bottom. There are 10 ambush cards and each one has a danger number in the top right corner from 1 to 10. Lower numbers are weaker and higher numbers are more dangerous. Some other cards will refer to these numbers like this minor dark power. Ambush cards can increase horror, increase bloodlust, or place X tokens in nearby spaces. X tokens indicate the area has been scanned and confirmed to be empty, so when the Evomorph ambushes you, it will not appear in spaces with X's. For example, this card says to place an X token in the closest space to you without a token. If the space you're standing on doesn't have a token, then place it there since that's the closest space to you. If, however, your space does have an X, then place the token on an adjacent space of your choice. Speaking of ambushing, the highest danger cards will instruct you to move the Bloodlust marker to the next evolved space on the Bloodlust track. It's important to remember to do any other effects you pass on the track, such as increasing horror. When a Youngling evolves into an adult, there's a number of effects that take place, so let's go through them. First, move the marker to adult on the evolution card and follow the instructions. Its max health increases to 10 and then it recovers all health. Add hearts until you have 10 health and heal any minor dark powers currently in play. Next, reveal the dark power card and rotate the ambush deck so the adult side is oriented at the top. Each dark power card causes the Evomorph to ambush you immediately, plus another ongoing effect that varies between cards. When the dark power is revealed, place the Evomorph in the closest space to you without an X token and remove all X tokens. Remember that if your space doesn't have an X token, then that is the closest space to you and the Evomorph will appear on your space. If your space does have an X, then place the Evomorph on an adjacent space of your choice. After doing all these steps to evolve the Evomorph, don't forget to do any other actions on the ambush card. For instance, the number 10 card tells you to evolve, and then it has a killer action where the Evomorph will target the closest victim or final girl and attack. Now that the Evomorph is an adult, it can still vanish whenever you see this vanish symbol on tarot cards. You'll still remove it from the board, place it on the tarot deck, and end the killer phase. When you draw an ambush card in future killer phases, make sure you have the ambush deck with the adult side on top and follow the instructions on the adult side. Ignore the effects that are upside down on the Youngling side. There's a new action card called Scan that lets you add X tokens to the board and possibly force the Evomorph to reveal itself. There are 3 copies of Scan in the action tableau and they cost 1 time to purchase. You can only resolve the Scan action when the Evomorph is vanished, but you can still discard it to convert partial successes or to gain 1 time even if the Evomorph isn't vanished. Unlike other action cards, there's a line for 3 successes. On 3 successes, you place the Evomorph in your space, remove all X tokens, skip the next killer phase, and remove the Scan card from the game. On 2 successes, you place an X token in your space and reduce the horror by 1. On 1 success, place an X token in your space and lose 1 time. On a fail, the horror increases by 1, you lose 1 time, and the action phase immediately ends. That's it for the Evomorph, so let's go over the USS Konrad next. The Konrad has keycards located throughout the map that you can use to activate maintenance shafts and maintenance cards. You start with 1 keycard in your backpack, there are 2 on the map, and there might be more in the item decks as well. If you're on a space with a keycard, you can pick it up by spending 1 time, but you can't pick it up when you're moving through the space, you must be stopped. When you gain a keycard from the map, take one of the 2 set-aside item cards and put it in your backpack. Then place the keycard from the map onto the card. If you find a keycard while searching, just put that card in your backpack and take a keycard token from the supply and put it on the card. Using keycards is free, it doesn't cost any time, so let's look at the different ways they can be used now. Maintenance shafts are brightly colored paths that connect 2 spaces on the Konrad that are not normally connected. There are a total of 4 maintenance shafts on the board and they each have an empty keycard token connected to them. All maintenance shafts start the game as inactive and nobody can move through them, not the killer or any victims or the final girl. When you are adjacent to an inactive maintenance shaft, you can place an available keycard token on it to activate it. This doesn't cost time, you just need to use a token in your inventory. After a maintenance shaft is activated, you can freely move through it and victims will follow you through it too. Enemies, however, can never move through maintenance shafts even after being activated unless a specific card or effect allows them to. There are 4 spaces on the ship that are highlighted in purple and have this purple gear symbol. A special function can be activated in each of these rooms as shown on the 3 maintenance cards. The Crusher is activated at the trash compactor, the Incinerator at the furnace, the Airlock at the hangar, and the self-destruct at the bridge. Each card specifies which room it's activated in and how many keycards are required. There's also a description of the effect once it's activated. In order to activate these special functions, you must be stopped in the required room, not passing through it. If you have the required number of keycards, simply take them from your inventory and put them on the maintenance card. No extra time is required. Then follow the instructions shown on the card. There are 4 special functions on the ship. Let's go through them one by one now. The first maintenance card has 2 functions on it which are activated separately. The Crusher is activated at the trash compactor and requires 1 keycard. Once it's activated, whenever an enemy or victim ends its movement at the trash compactor, they take 1 damage. Fortunately, this does not affect you or victims following you. The Incinerator is activated at the furnace and requires 2 keycards. Once it's activated, whenever an enemy or victim enters the furnace, roll a die to see what happens. If you roll a 1, they take 3 damage. On a 2 to 3, they take 2 damage. On a 4 to 5, they take 1 damage, and on a 6, nothing happens. Just like the Crusher, this does not affect you or victims following you. Note that the Crusher activates when they end their movement in the space, and the Incinerator activates as soon as they enter the space. The Airlock is activated at the hangar and requires 3 keycards. Once activated, place the Airlock token in the hangar. During the action phase, if you are in the hangar or an adjacent space, you can discard the token and open the Airlock. This instantly kills everyone in the hangar. And if the superloader was in the hangar, it is destroyed. If the killer dies, reveal their final health token and place them at the junction if they come back to life. They manage to grab onto the ship and crawl back inside. If you are in the hangar when the Airlock is open, then roll a die. On a 5 or 6, you manage to survive. Otherwise, you lose the game and do not flip over your final health token. The self-destruct sequence is activated on the bridge and requires 4 keycards. Once activated, place the self-destruct token at the start of the countdown track. During the upkeep phase, move the token 1 space to the right. When the token reaches the final space, the ship self-destructs, killing everyone. If you are not at one of the exit spaces, you lose the game. If you did make it to an exit, then you win, even if the killer is also on an exit space. You manage to launch the escape pod while the killer is stuck on the ship when it blows up. Just to clarify, you have the rest of the action phase on the turn you activate it, plus the next turn to get to an exit. During upkeep, when the token reaches the final space, the ship immediately blows up. Going back to the keycards, when you place a token onto a maintenance shaft or card, you leave the empty keycard item in your backpack. There is no limit to the number of keycards you can carry, and there's no limit to the number of items in your backpack. I usually just stack the empty keycards on top of each other. You can't discard a keycard item, and if you're instructed to discard an item, either randomly or by choice, you ignore keycards for that purpose. There are also 2 tarot cards that tell you to remove all the keycards from the board and from maintenance cards. System Reboot returns them to their item cards, and Solar Interference randomly redistributes them. The wording on these cards is a little confusing, but keycards on the board refers to keycards used to activate maintenance shafts and not the 2 keycards that start on the map as part of setup. When keycards are removed from maintenance shafts, they are inactive again, and when they are removed from maintenance cards, those functions are immediately cancelled. Remove any tokens associated with them. There's one last thing to go over, and that's the superloader. It starts the game in the hangar, but you need to find the superloader key item to use it. When you equip the superloader using the key, take the item card next to the game board and put it in your hands. Any items previously in your hands move to your backpack. While equipped, victims will not follow you. Movement is reduced by 1 to a minimum of 1. Damage received is reduced by 1 to a minimum of 1. And you can't play the short or long rest action cards or search. But the superloader adds 2 extra damage whenever you attack. If you ever unequip the superloader or lose the key, then leave the superloader token in your current space and return the item card next to the game board. You can't place the superloader in your backpack, but you can move through active maintenance shafts with it. So that's all the special rules for the Evomorph and the USS Konrad. Now I'm going to go over some frequently misplayed rules and cards. First, I wanted to point out that when the hatchling evolves into the youngling, it vanishes from the board and doesn't reappear until it evolves into an adult. So the youngling won't ever be on the board unless you force it out with a scan action. The USS Konrad has a minor dock power, which is unusual for a location. The minor dock power spaces above the killer board are printed for convenience, and there's actually no limit to the number of minor dock powers a killer can have at one time. Next is the USS Konrad's Flamethrower, which is different than Station 2891's Flamethrower. The Konrad's Flamethrower has a range of 0 to 1, adds 3 damage, and says that all damage must be distributed evenly between victims, enemies, and you in that order. Damage wraps around, so if you do 4 damage in this scenario, you'll kill the victim, do 1 to the enemy, 1 to you, and then the remaining 1 will go to the enemy again. Or if you do 5 damage in this scenario, you'll do 3 to the enemy and 2 to you. Also, since the flamethrower has a range of 0 to 1, you can use it 1 space away from the killer to avoid damaging yourself. You can also use it through maintenance shafts that have been activated with a keycard. Lastly, I will repeat the rule that's most often missed. At the start of of the game, when the Evomorph is a hatchling, you do not increase Bloodlust when a victim dies unless the hatchling killed them. If a victim dies any other way, you lose 1 time instead. This is very important since the hatchling will evolve after its first kill. Alright, and that's how you play Into the Void. Let me know in the comments what you think of this feature film and how you'd rate it compared to the others in Series 2. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to me on YouTube. If you want to check out more of my videos, then click the links on the screen and maybe you'll find a new game to play. And with that, Michael Skeleton is out.